Oh, good, okay, it's actually recording. Hello, guys. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at Carol Ann Duffy's Havisham. Like I said, even if you decide you don't want to do Unit 1 and Unit 2, we still need the basis of the poetry understanding that we gained from studying Unit 1 and Unit 2 in order to do a good job of Unit 3. So we still kind of need to read the poems. Also, I just think this poem is actually really cool. So Havisham, we've jumped a little bit ahead, so if you're a bit confused about where you are, you should be on page 36 in your poetry booklet. And the reason I've jumped a little bit ahead is because we were getting into the kind of romance-y poems and the poems to do with romantic relationships, and they kind of start off with like first love and crush and things like that, and then move on into things like steam and adultery, and then they kind of end in this place with like Havisham and the suicide. So I thought actually it makes good sense to kind of bookend them so that when we read the poems in the middle, we understand why the poems in the middle are the way they are. So just worry about this one for a minute, because we can't understand this one until we've read some of the other poems anyway. Ooh, let's see if we can get a bit bigger on this one. Okay, so first thing we'll do, I think, is read through the poem, and then when we've read through the poem, we'll go through and annotate. Beloved sweetheart bastard, not a day since then I haven't wished him dead. Prayed for it so hard I've dark green pebbles for eyes, ropes on the back of my hands I could strangle with. Spinster, I stink and remember. Whole days in bed cawing no at the wall. The dress yellowing, trembling if I open the wardrobe, the slewed mirror, full length. Her, myself, who did this to me? Fuse curses that are sounds not words. Some nights better, the lost body over me, my fluent tongue in its mouth, in its ear, then down, till suddenly I bite awake. Love's hate behind a white veil, a red balloon bursting in my face. Bang. I stabbed at a wedding cake. Give me a male corpse for a long, slow honeymoon. Don't tell me it's only the heart that breaks. Okay, so as you can see, Havisham is not a happy lady. Okay, we'll start off with just some of the main obvious things. Let's grab a pen. So this is a dramatic monologue. Dramatic. You can't even see that. There you go. Dramatic monologue. Which means that one person is speaking throughout, but also it's dramatic as a character. It's not Duffy. Okay. And we actually know which character it is, which is quite nice. So it's Miss Havisham from Great Expectations, which is a Charles Dickens novel. Now, I don't want to ruin the novel for you because some of you might want to read it. It's a fantastic novel, and it's free, and it's on that list of books that I put out for the coursework. Great Expectations, basically Miss Havisham is like a secondary character in this novel, and she is left, she's jilted, so she's left at the altar, and instead of, going, oh, okay, clearly this wasn't a marriage for me, never mind, I will move on in a healthy way, she decides to freeze time at the time at which she should have been married. So she never changes out of her wedding dress. She keeps the wedding cake and all the feast on the table in her house. And she does this for years and years, so obviously it's all disgusting and dusty and gloomy. Even to the point that she has one shoe, like she'd got ready for her wedding and she had one shoe on and hadn't put the other shoe on yet. And she never puts the other shoe on. She stays exactly in that moment. She stops all the clocks and stays exactly in that moment. She's this really weird, really gothic character. And the way that she's presented is really spooky, really quite frightening. And then you can see that this is from her perspective. So there's definitely an element of that kind of off-putting spooky in the poem, but also there's probably more sympathy for the character than there is in the Dickens novel. So if we start looking at the poem itself, you start off here with beloved sweetheart bastard. I haven't got a good colour for these. What are we going to go for? We'll go for a nice pinky colour. Look, there we go. I just wanted to point out, first of all, the plosive in that alliteration. Remember, we say how plosives in our alliteration mean that someone's going, they're spitting, they're angry. And then the oxymoron between beloved sweetheart and bastard. So can you see how that's oxymoronic? That's an oxymoron. Because those two things, remember we say oxy, sharp, moron, dull, because it's a contradiction in terms, it's two opposites put together. Well, if someone's your beloved and your sweetheart, how are they a bastard? That doesn't make sense, they don't go together, right? So it's this idea of how, I would say this idea of conflict is running through it, how conflicted she feels. Not a day since then I haven't wished him dead. So it just shows how strongly she feels and how consistent supposedly she feels, even though she is inconsistent. Can you see how you've got inconsistency and conflict, consistency, which is another conflict, because you can't be both consistent and inconsistent. I haven't wished him dead, prayed for it so hard I've dark green pebbles for eyes, ropes on the back of my hand I could strangle with. So she's literally praying for his death, but when she says here, prayed for it so hard I've dark green pebbles for eyes, it's the idea that her psychological damage that she's taken from this, right? Let's try to spell psychological. Psycho. There we go. Logical. We can't talk and spell psychological at the same time. Got to pick one. So, oh, that's blurry as hell. Okay. Whee! There we go. So her psychological damage is also showing in like physical damage or physiological damage, but I'm going to put physical. It's the idea that she's starting to look like her mind feels. And she's starting to become like pebbles for eyes. She's starting to become hard or damaging. So when she's got ropes on the back of her hands, now that could just be her age. Like you see when older people, well, I can't really do it with my hand, but when older people get really old, the tendons of their hands tend to stick out. So the idea that she's gotten older, but also the idea of ropes that she could strangle with. She's becoming a weapon. She's becoming dangerous to him. And obviously that violence that's inherent in strangle. The next one here, look, spinster. Okay, so the word is placed on its own, a single word, with this little cut off here, this little caesura there. So it's this idea that spinster means a woman who doesn't marry. And it's the idea that she feels isolated. So the word is isolated, like she is isolated. Which is kind of sad, really. Poor Havisham. She does some really evil stuff in that book, though. So, I mean, it's a bit weird to root for the person who does all the evil stuff. Spinster, I stink and remember. Okay, so you've got the repetition of the sounds in spinster and stink coming together, but also she stinks. Whee! There we go. Because she's still wearing the same dress. And that's pulled up again in the dress yellowing, because if you think about a white dress that's worn consistently for decades, it's going to become like yellow and kind of gross. Even if it were kept clean and not worn every day, which it is not. Whole days in bed cawing no at the wall. Well, this is just pulling up how unhappy she is that she is in this situation. Let's try resetting that so it's nice and clear. There we go. So she's literally stuck in bed saying no. So this is, I mean, a version of her having depression, but at a time when depression wasn't a thing, because it was a thing when Carol Ann Duffy wrote this poem. This is one of those timeline issues where when Charles Dickens wrote Great Expectations, absolutely the character of Havisham has some fairly serious depression, but they didn't have a word for it. They didn't have the understanding of it, so they don't know how to express it, and they express it through, you know, the way that they present Havisham. And Duffy's using that characterization in her poem, so even though Duffy's poem is more recent, she's using it there. Whole days in bed cawing no at the wall. Pull out that word cawing. So obviously just I don't have space to write that she's depressed. Let's put it over there. And obviously that links on to the other poems that are around it, because this is at the end of a failed relationship or whatever. That's the impression that she's trying to give. But it gets more hopeful again afterwards. So, like, it's not a complete downer of a poetry collection. Cawing no at the wall. The word cawing, it makes her sound like a parrot, maybe, because she's saying the same thing over and over again. Cawing is something you might hear of, like, a bird or a crow or something. And the repetition of the O's there obviously is showing how she's, like, howling, how she's calling out those words. The dress yellowing, because the white dress in a wedding is a symbol of purity, and that's why it's meant to be white. So for it to become yellow, it's this idea that she's slowly becoming less pure, even if she's not becoming it. It means sexual purity, so it's like you wear a white dress to a wedding because you're a virgin, in theory, although this is a really old tradition. But Havisham's becoming less pure because she keeps doing evil things. So it's like, gosh darn, I've done something evil again. Trembling if I open the wardrobe. The slewed mirror, full length. Her, myself, who did this to me. Okay, so a slewed mirror is the idea that her reflection is a poor reflection of her. It's damaged in some way. Maybe the idea that it's a reminder to her, the mirror, because she looks in it, but also the idea that memory is, I guess, false, slanted. Let's say memory is slanted, because that works, right? Because slewed means slanted. Your memory is also slewed or slanted, right? You never remember things exactly how they were. You remember the version of things that you perceived at the time, maybe. And sometimes you remember them with the alteration of the perceptions you've had since then. So that's one that you need to be kind of mindful of, this idea of memory that's running through, because meantime, memory runs through all the time. And this idea that she started to lose her version of identity. So you've got her, myself, who did this to me. She doesn't... Ooh, look, that's a lovely wiggly line. There we go. She doesn't feel like herself. It's I'm going to say it's ambiguous. She doesn't know if the person in the mirror is her, as in a separate third person, because that's third person, or first person, her actual self. And then she questions it. And because of this, her, myself, who did this to me, can you see how you've got that enjambment between there and there? Let's write the word enjambment over here, look. because of that, you don't know if she's taking responsibility here, myself who did this, I'm the one who did it, or if she's pushing off responsibility and questioning it, who did this to me, as though she's begging for help externally. So you have this kind of double meaning thing going on there. And I think that's just showing this idea that she's not quite got the best grip on what's going on around her. But there are moments of lucidity in it where she knows that it was her on some level. Puce curses that are sounds, not words. So the idea of sounds, not words, as her curses, is the idea of she's becoming almost like animal-like, and that links to core and no in the previous stanza. Some nights better, the lost body over me. My fluent tongue in its mouth, in its ear, then down till suddenly I bite awake. Okay, so the lost body is him, right? And then she describes my fluent tongue in its mouth and its ear. So the fluent tongue partly links to the idea of the work of like her words or this poem in some way, but also fluent like fluid, like a river. And can you see how fluent is linked here? Because there's no punctuation between in its mouth and its ear. So fluent is highlighted in its mouth and its ear. Then down till I suddenly bite awake. Now, I am going to bank on the idea that you guys are like 17 and can work out what happens when she takes her fluid tongue down from her mouth and from his mouth and ear. She takes it down. And I'm pretty sure you guys can work out what she bites awake on. Right? It's this idea of emasculation, because she's removing what makes him masculine by biting awake. I mean, obviously he's not there, right? She's asleep. It's a dream. She's not actually doing these things. I want to apologise for that noise, by the way, in the background. That is Microsoft Teams, because I'm in 8,000 meetings lately. Love's hate behind a white veil, a red balloon bursting in my face. So obviously love's hate is another one of those, let's highlight that. It's another one of those oxymorons. A red balloon bursting in my face. So the balloon bursting is this idea of like something blowing up in your face, but also this links to the Sylvia Plath poem Balloons, which I would recommend googling at this point and reading, because it's the idea of something blowing up in your face, like something unexpectedly bad happening. Bang, and then notice that it's a full stop. It's not an exclamation mark. You'd totally expect an exclamation mark after the word bang. And it's this idea that actually she's unsurprised. She's lost feeling. It kind of goes with the depression thing that she was feeling earlier. I stabbed at a wedding cake. Okay, so that verb there, stabbed. This pen is running out. Let's just, okay, so that verb there, stabbed, is there partly to suggest that, like, it's violent, right? Like a violent verb. Ah, that's just dead. Let's just give that one up for a bad job. Let's try a different pen. Okay, so it's violent, but also it's the idea of like taking a chance at something. You take a stab. Because she tried for a wedding cake, and in that case then a wedding cake would be just a symbol of marriage, right? It's a symbol of trying to get married, but it didn't work. Or she stabs at the wedding cake, she's so angry at him, she wants to show him how mad she is. Give me a male corpse for a long, slow honeymoon. Don't think it's only the heart that breaks. Right, okay, so I feel like I probably don't need to explain what she intends to do with the male corpse on a long, slow honeymoon, but I would definitely link this to the poem Stuffed. And it's this idea then that she's kind of so unhappy, and the idea that she's feeling broken in some way. Now, when she says, "Don't tell me it's only the heart that breaks," I'm wondering if she's trying to explain that it's the mind as well, or the emotions. But can you see how here, because of that, literally the word is breaking. It's almost like sobbing. All right. So you have a really quick overview there of the poem Havisham. It's a super weird poem. Have a lovely, lovely day, and I'll speak to you next lesson.